killed him, when, and how? The usual answer is philosophers, scientists, and intellectuals during the Enlightenment and scientific revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries, and by means of a frontal assault. In the 1660s, so the story goes, Baruch Spinoza first showed that a world without God could be philosophically coherent. In the 18th century there was a double assault. Polemicists such as Voltaire and Thomas Paine openly attacked the Church's moral authority, and philosophers as varied as David Hume, Immanuel Kant, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau constructed systems which, whether or not we classify them as strictly atheist, left Christianity far behind. God became, as Pierre-Simon Laplace supposedly told Napoleon in 1802, a redundant hypothesis. 19th-century philosophers such as Ludwig Feuerbach and Arthur Schopenhauer found the case against religion to be almost self-evident. By the time Charles Darwin provided an explanation for the origins of life without reference to God in 1859, the work was virtually completed. All that the wider culture has done since then is catch up. I wrote this book because I am not satisfied with that stereotypical account. The timescale, the suspects, and the nature of the murder are all wrong. Telling the story a different way not only changes our sense of history, it casts our current moment of pell-mell secularization in a different light. To take the simplest problem first, the death by philosophy narrative is a poor fit with the actual chronology of Western secularization. Were the religious revivals of the later 18th and 19th centuries, or the apparent Christian resurgence across the West in the 1950s, simply religion's death throes? Was the sudden collapse of the West's religious cultures in the 1960s merely the shattering of a husk after centuries of patient hollowing out? Even if you can explain away this chronological mismatch, the conventional starting point is plainly wrong. If atheism only became a live possibility in the 1660s, how could Bunyan, who was nobody's intellectual elitist, depict such an assertive and recognizable atheist in the 1670s? How could it be said in the 1620s that there were 50,000 atheists in Paris, or in the 1590s that there is no sect now in England so scattered as atheism? How could a preacher in Florence in 1305 warn that the question, "How can it be that God exists?" was being put by madmen every day? These early testimonies to unbelief are often dismissed on the grounds that they lacked philosophical sophistication. If you are only interested in the history of atheism as a system of ideas, then that is the end of the matter, and this book is not for you. What interests me is that unbelief clearly existed in practice, in some form at some level, before it existed in theory. In which case, we have not only been looking at the wrong centuries, but profiling the wrong suspects. Intellectuals and philosophers may think they make the weather, but they are more often driven by it. People who read and write books, like you and me, have a persistent tendency to overestimate the power of ideas. Some of us may occasionally change our beliefs and our lives as the result of a chain of conscious reasoning, but not very often or very honestly. Our own age has forcibly reminded us that intellectual elites often struggle to bring their societies with them. Their default role is to tag along, explaining with perfect hindsight why things inevitably turned out as they did. The conventional story has it that philosophers attacked religion, and people therefore stopped believing. But what if people stopped believing and then found they needed arguments to justify their unbelief? The heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing, cautioned Blaise Pascal, the 17th century's shrewdest wrestler with doubt. Apart from a heroic or cold-hearted few, most of us make our lives great choices, beliefs, values, identities, purposes, intuitively, with our whole selves, embedded as we are in our social and historical contexts, usually unable to articulate why we have done it, often not even aware we have done it. If we